a lot of people seem to get problems with finishing tracks, and I wanted to go into like some quick ways to get ideas down and to get some finished tracks out there, because once you've finished one, the rest become a lot easier. What I would tend to do is just make a bass line or a lead line that loops over a short period, so it's not actually progressing, it's just a pattern which works with the beat. For an example here, I've just got a simple bass line, okay, going with the bass drum. Now, once that's been done, I then start to create lines, like lead lines or rhythms that would go with that bass line. And again, not progressing those at the start, just get something that's solid and working. So here I've added in a line, nothing's progressing, okay, it's just going on its own way. What I tend to do at that point is I would then see how much shelf life I could get out of one line. So I'd start progressing one line but not progressing the bass line. So I'd just see how I could work around the basics that I've got there. So here's the example. The stab line that I've written, I then I'd make it 4 bars long and begin to see how that progresses. So let's make sure. Right. So you can see that I've got a very simple line there, and it's just opening up a little bit. So I decided that that's fine, and I'd work with that. I'd then create like another pattern on the same rule. So to start off with, it would just be dead simple. So I created this line to go along with it. Let's make sure the filters are right. Filters are right. You see that's working with the original bass line. The bass line's not progressing yet, okay? At this point with the lines, I'd start to be able to feel where I want the lead line to go and things like that. And what I would do then is progress the lead line over that flat bass line. So still no progression on the bass. Now, you've got the basics of a track there, but to get it really moving, obviously the other elements need to progress around it. So I would then start looking at the bass line and trying out different variations of that bass line to see what pitch would work. So basically with the lead line guiding, one by one, I'd start pitching the different bass lines around until I find like one that works. Now, once you get all these parts working, the actual finishing of the track becomes a lot easier because you're not fighting with sounds, you're not fighting with arrangement problems, because you've got everything stable right at the start. This is quite important because if the roots of what you're making are not strong, then you're just going to be hitting problems after problems later on. So you get your sounds like roughly balanced at the start in sort of these loops, and then it's quite an easy case of you know, in Ableton you just record a short loop and then you just copy the lot across and you start chiseling out different parts to get a rough arrangement. Some common elements which a lot of dance musicians use is that they would bring in and take out multiple elements at a time. So when you come to actually arranging a track, rather than just pulling one sound out or adding one sound, is try to bring them in pairs or more, and then that way you hit the listener with like more information, and it gives them, you know, something a bit different to get into when it happens. Right, so I've got my little 16 bar loop that's working, so now I'm just going to try and make my life easy and get this track moving as quickly as possible in some sort of arrangement. What I normally would do is just record off 16 bars, so set Ableton to just record that in. So we just stop that there, we'll just take a short segment. In our arrange window, it's all now there. Right, and to make my life easy, just in Ableton, I'm just going to copy and paste the whole lot across. So we just get the basics for song now in there. Obviously everything's all playing at the same time, but what you then do is you just mute your basics and cut out the different parts of the track you don't want. So at least something's there for you to work with, and you can experiment with bringing different things in and out. Then you'd find it a lot quicker to get things moving, rather than trying to think, you know, what do I do next, you know, where to begin. At least get some information in your DAW, and then you can get to work on it, you know, usually by muting different parts in and out. And then you can, you know, later on, once you've got the bare bones and some intros and outros and some breakdowns in there, you can then go into your detail work there, rather than messing around back in sort of the creation stage. You know, and this is where you can sort of spend your time, and at least you've got a good amount of data there to work with. Some people tend to get bogged down in sounds and you know, making things work. I tend to leave any detail work to right at the end. My sort of riffs and ideas tend to be very basic sounds, saws or squares, and you know, generally they might just sort of work for the idea, but it's just to enable me to get a whole idea out and down, without worrying too much about going into everything being perfect at that time. What I would then do is try to get an arrangement working, and then start fiddling with sounds as I'm going along, to try and make things sound interesting, or just to fit in the mix. Otherwise, if you spend too much time at the start messing around with these sounds, by the time you create your mix and progression, all the balances are going to be out, and things might not sit properly. Whereas if you work at them at the other end, you can tend to get things to work a little bit better. You know, your delays and reverbs and things like that will all behave a bit differently in your final mix. So tend to them there, rather than procrastinating at the start on details. You know, get moving, get the track in there. And now I'll just go a little bit into detail about how I'd actually get into dealing with that bulk of information that I've copied across into the DAW. Is that at the moment I can just see everything that's been recorded, and it's all playing at the same time. So literally I'd just set it on a loop, and I'd start pulling things out to try and make like an intro, and you know, I'd like keep the bass drum running and things like that, but I wouldn't be bringing in the bass. So literally straight away I could just look at common elements that I want to take out straight away. Like I don't want the stab sounds, I don't want the pad at the start in this track, and any other superfluous sounds, but for a little bit of an intro I might keep another sound. I'd take out percussion that gives the track pace, I'll take that out at the start. Anything that you know that you might be commonly introducing at a later date, you'd leave behind and just delete it at this moment. But you see, it's all here further on down in the track, so if you decide that you want it back, you can just pull a copy back. So you just carry on like that, and you chisel away slowly, and you might find that you suddenly start to think, oh, I could do with a break there, and that's when you need to follow that intuition and just go into your detail then at that point, and try and do what you can hear happening, or at least play around with ideas at that point. A lot of people get trapped early on, and they just end up with half-finished tracks and things like that, because they haven't dealt with that phase right at the start, getting their loops solid, and the actual riffs working, and all the instruments working really well together.